Welcome back to Chapter 1. This is a podcast where we talk about media, primarily film, books, and music. And we react to it based in a lens of how media influences us in this human experience and how we can relate to it. So we like to get emotional here. Buckle up. Today we're talking about a film that I was introduced to by my uncle, I believe. Yeah, he saw this and he really enjoyed it, and he recommended that I check it out, and boy was he good in doing that. Today we're talking about Only Lovers Left Alive, which is a film directed by Jarmusch, and it came out in 2013. Holy shit. Wow. I didn't realize that this movie was that old, I guess, if you consider that old. So about 12 years old at this point. Wow, that's cool. So Only Lovers Left Alive is this fun little film that I'm going to summarize it as a grungy vampire movie that is just done in a different way than I've seen other vampire movies done. I'm going to talk about a lot of different stuff here in the way that I'm looking at it, but if you like gothic vampire movies that are moody, great. Just stop listening to me right now and go watch it. So Only Lovers Left Alive follows this vampire couple, and the vampire couple is played by Tilda Swinton and Tom Hiddleston. There are a ton of other big names and beautiful actors in this film, but I'm primarily going to speak about them. The supporting crew did such a fantastic... this whole entire cast did such a good job, but the supporting crew did do a really, really nice job. So this film follows this couple, and when you're introduced to them separately, because the concept is that they've been married for centuries and they just come together every once in a while, which is such a fun dynamic to think about when you compare it to traditional marriage. Something about having someone that is consistent throughout your life, but you can kind of veer away from and then come back to, depending on the way that the world is moving and how you're both feeling, feels so sexy. And that is through the lens of like, we're living for centuries, we're living forever. So as a human being, it doesn't quite work. But as a vampire, I love it. And I haven't seen another vampire movie where it kind of highlights that dynamic, so this one's just a little different. And the main characters are named Adam and Eve, which I think is a cute play on biblical culture. But we're introduced to them separately, and eventually they come together because Adam is having a tough time, and which is so interesting to think about, like a vampire that is depressed in the traditional human sense, like just having a rough time and can't get out of his head, and is just going through it and needs a little bit of help from his partner. I think that what I love about this movie the most is the dynamic between Tilda Swinton and Tom Hiddleston. Their chemistry is so electric, and physically they're both so beautiful. Tilda Swinton is just so stunning. Something about her bone structure and the way that she carries herself in this film do it for me. Tom Hiddleston has like this long, well, not long, but like shoulder length jet black hair, which does it for me because I grew up having a total crush on Jack White. So picture Jack White, thin and moody and just eternal. And that's what you get from Tom Hiddleston's character in this. He's also a musician and has lived so long that he's influenced musicians, scientists, and all of that. Which I think is another kind of fun concept that they play on in this, is that someone who lives forever having influence over the major names in the scientific fields and the music industry and all of that. That's such an interesting thought. if vampires are real, do they have an influence on the major human players that are in the world right now? Think about it. Just let yourself have a break from reality here and just play with that thought. Tilda Swinton's character is also super fucking cool because she can pick up energies from things and determine how old they are by touching them, which is like such a strange power to have, but it's helpful, and highlighted in this movie often. So her character is just so suave and feels grounded. Between the two of them, it feels like Tilda Swinton's character, Eve, is just more grounded and potentially a lot older than Adam, Tom Hiddleston's character. Regardless of that idea, their chemistry, I'm going to keep saying this throughout the entire episode, I'm sorry. Their chemistry and the way that they interact with each other and the way that they were directed to interact with each other in this film is so beautiful and tender. And again, I just love the idea of having a partner that is there and is grounded, and you guys have each other forever. So you just keep coming back to each other. That to me is really fun to play with and a beautiful, beautiful idea. Because it's realistic too. Like, there are people in my life who feel so grounded, and couples that just, they're just so powerful. And that's how these guys feel. They feel confident in each other, I guess. Yeah, I definitely have couples that are in my life that I look at and I'm like, they're just so confident in each other that nothing outside of them disturbs them. It matters to them, but because they have this connection and this like holy energy, that's so dramatic. There's just this energetic field that wraps around them and kind of just allows them to glide through life. It's just such a nice thing to witness. So, Only Lovers Left Alive was directed by Jim Jarmusch, and he has actually, I looked up his filmography. I haven't seen any of his other films. The only other one I recognize the title of is Coffee and Cigarettes, and I haven't seen it. I have no idea what it's about. If it's anything like this, the vibe and the mood and the way that it was shot and everything, then I'll probably take a look at it. I'm not sure what the plot for that one is. It probably has to do with drinking coffee and smoking cigarettes. What do you think? I'd laugh so hard if there wasn't a single fucking cup of coffee or a single cigarette in that film. Wow, what a treasure that would be. Anyway, Only Lovers Left Alive is just the way that it was shot, the way that it was edited, the way that it was handled, the score. It all makes so much sense. And to be blunt, when I first saw this movie, the score was so annoying to me because it just felt off. But as I rewatched it in preparation for this episode, it's not. Of course it's not. I'm just dramatic, and the score fits perfectly. It intertwines with the regions that you switch to throughout the film, regions being like the physical regions of the world that they're living in, which I think is really thoughtful and something that happens often in films, obviously, but it just felt a little bit more considerate this watch through. And apparently the entire score, or not the entire score, the majority of the score was created by the director. And he used to be in a band called Squirrel, which is actually really interesting when I think about the way that I connect with music and the way that I watch other people connect with music, and the idea of a director being responsible for directing and the score. It's so interesting because I can imagine that when you have a creative team that aligns perfectly, creating something like this feels flawless. But I can also imagine that on occasion there are too many cooks in the kitchen, right? So sometimes things may not align, and I can imagine that that would create tension in the creative process. when I think about a director also being responsible for the score of the movie, that brings me some peace, just because you're removing one extra person and there's less opportunity for miscommunication, less opportunity for alignment. So having control over those two major players when creating something like this was probably extremely stressful, but also I can imagine brings on this peace when you consider the responsibility for it and how you have a lot of control over the end product. I'm sure that there is so much peace in having a creative team that just allows you to do what's best for you too. In fact, I don't know what I would almost prefer. I love the energy that I get when I'm collaborating with people and the end product comes out exactly how we're envisioning it, or the end product comes out in this like beautiful mess that just like happens and we all allow it. I love that. I love that energy, and I've felt that so many times in my life because I was a photographer at one point, and now I'm kind of switching gears and being creative in other ways, but the collaboration continues because I find it so beneficial to me and my creative process and my creative energy, and people just love to collaborate with each other, especially when it comes to creative things like this, especially when you get yourself into a state of like play and you just unwind and let things happen. Ugh, it's so much fun. So I can imagine benefits to both sides, right? Having control over a lot of this stuff would be really fun so that the end product comes out exactly how you want it to. But also, if you could get that end product with a team, that'd be fantastic. I speculate that this was done because Jim Jarmusch wanted to have faith and confidence in the end product. And I think that's what he did here. And it comes across. It's so moody and dark and delicious that I think, if that's what his goal was, he did it well. So this movie, again, follows this couple, and the first half of the movie follows them through the issues that are happening with Adam, and then Eve coming to reconnect with him and just support him through these times that he's going through. And throughout the whole entire first half of the movie, you're kind of held in this, oh my God, this couple is so tender and sweet to each other. And this tension where you can feel that something bad is going to happen. And occasionally the characters will bring up Eve's sister and how they've interacted in the past and how they've been getting this feeling that she's going to be coming back into their lives. And eventually, she does. And that's where shit just hits the fan. There were several times during this watch through where I was like, holy shit, this actor is doing such an incredible job portraying little sister energy. And little sister Ava is played by Mia Wasikowska. And she just, I don't know, she's adorable, first of all. They dress her adorably. It's really interesting when you look at the costume design in this film. Adam and Eve are, they're so fucking cool. So, Adam dresses in all black. He's very moody. He's a musician. Black, leather, all that. You get the picture. Eve is the opposite. She dresses in all white. She still dresses in some leather, but a lot of her clothing is a little more loose fitting and flowy and feminine. Ava dresses in clothing that is adorable. Pink dresses and tights with little polka dots on them and all of this other stuff. So they really designed this character to be childish. And Mia Wasikowska does such a good job bringing that energy to the film too. There were several moments where I was like, oh my God, this character is so annoying. And I know we all have these pre-designed conceptions of what little siblings are. I'm the youngest sibling in my family, and I can only imagine that my brothers growing up were just like, what the fuck, And that is totally their right as the older siblings. But yeah, Mia Wasikowska just did a great job bringing that energy to set. And it's really interesting to see the dynamic between Ava, Eve, and Adam. Adam absolutely hates Ava because she's come into their lives like a whirlwind several times before and has just been destructive. And so I don't blame him for being like, what the hell, dude? Like, I don't want to deal with this again. But Eve is very grounded and is like, she's family and she might be in a tough spot. But Ava just comes in and fucks up again. At that point, I understand being understanding of someone who's younger than you. She's still technically an adult. This makes me think about like the vampirism and how it affects your psychological state. If you're bitten and turned, does your psychological state stay the same? Or do you continue to learn and grow and expand? That's a really interesting point. I've never ever thought about that with vampires before. I'm assuming that your psychological state shifts as you grow and experience things. It even makes me think that you don't. But maybe it just takes longer. Maybe that's the idea. Maybe you go through psychological shifts just a little bit slower because you have a lot more time to do so. So that is the big shift in this film. It goes from this like really beautiful, moody, sexy connection that these two vampires have, and then shifts into this like tense, stressful, unenjoyable plot twist. Because when Ava comes in and messes things up for Adam and Eve, they then have to clear their lives. They have to go out and reset, essentially. Because Ava kills someone. And I feel so bad for Adam when this happens, because the person that she kills is his contact that helps him get access to these really unique musical instruments and other things that he collects. So, like, not a huge deal. It's a huge deal that he died, but his purpose was to collect things for Adam that are just collections. It's not like he can't survive without those things. But I think Adam and this guy's connection were a little bit more than that. Adam needed someone that he could trust, and this person he could trust. It was never determined if this character knew that Adam was a vampire. From my perspective, I don't think he was aware. But still, having someone that you can trust with keeping you and your identity secret is huge, because that was a huge thing for Adam in this. So when Ava comes in and murders him, it's just it's such a letdown, and I kind of had my heartstrings pulled just because Adam's going through this rough, depressive time, and it felt like that connection with this character and access to the things that this character was helping him with were important to him. So the film switches gears at that point, and Adam and Eve go into survival mode because they have to flee the city that Adam was living in and the city that Eve was visiting him in, and they have to return to where she lives. And we find out that the person that was giving Eve access to blood, because these vampires are considerate and they get their blood through different sources other than just biting people, we find out that Eve's connection to getting access to blood is frayed. It's dying, basically. So they don't have access to clean, safe blood. And so the last half an hour of this film is this progression of them in her city trying to figure out what to do, because obviously they need blood. And it's interesting to watch them kind of go through this downfall and how quickly it turned, because Eve does something that is so loving. Maybe. Is that the word I'm looking for? I don't know. In my brain, I'm like, you should not be doing this act because you're trying to survive and you need to figure your shit out. But in this heightened situation, Eve decides to do something for Adam to make him feel more comfortable where he's living, and takes time to do that, meaning she's sacrificing their timeline, basically. Maybe she's not looking at it that way, because ultimately, if they needed to, they could just bite someone and drain their blood, right? So they have choices. But it's so interesting. What happens throughout this part of the film is that they get extremely tired and they're worn down and they look rough. And I love the way that they did the makeup throughout this, because even their costumes, like, it felt like Eve's costumes became baggier. So they had to increase the size of her clothing to make her look sickly. And the way that they treated their eyes is just so much fun. I love the way that certain media treats vampires' eyes. Like, if you ever have seen the TV series Midnight Mass, created by the same people that did A Haunting on Hill House, the way that they treat those vampire eyes is so cool and creepy, and it just makes my skin crawl. But that's a reaction for another day. Anyway, all the way back to my original point of this decision that Eve makes while they're actively, feels like, dying, is she, because they've crossed the entire planet to get to her hometown, she, I believe, wants to make Adam feel a little more welcome, because he just had this traumatic experience of losing his connection to his hobbies, essentially. Then had to leave everything behind because that connection was killed. And they would have been directly linked to that murder because in one of the scenes leading up to it, they were all out in public. God, Ava really just like fucked everything up for them. It's so interesting to hate a character. So Adam and Eve are declining, and Eve decides to buy Adam a really old instrument. It's a string instrument that I'm not even going to try and pronounce, but it's so interesting to think about when we're in survival mode and the things that we choose to do for love. Like, they were literally grasping for life, and she just goes, I'm gonna go do this thing for my lover to make him feel a little bit better. I think that's so beautiful. Stupid, but beautiful. And ultimately, obviously, they survive. You know, they get to their wits' end and decide to bite this couple that they stumble upon out in the streets. And the last image that you see in this film is Adam and Eve launching at you, fangs fully out, and their eyes, they've switched from these like dark, beautiful, I want to say black eyes, to this like almost brown toffee color, but it almost feels like there's like an oil spill filter over them, an extreme highlight. It's just so creepy. And it's the only time in the film that you actually see them bare their teeth intentionally, and the tension that it creates is so interesting and entertaining. Because throughout the whole film, they don't show you attacking people. They don't show you draining people because, first of all, that's not how they access blood. There's one moment throughout the film that someone does get drained, right? Ava kills someone. So I like that they don't show that, and they don't show it at the end either. I think that's really tasteful and suggestive, and I think that it allows the viewer to go off on like a creative thread on their own, you know, which is lovely. Sometimes I do appreciate when things are just left to the viewer to imagine. I think it's something that is so underdone these days because our attention spans are, you know, doing whatever they're doing, but shock value has become a huge thing everywhere. Even, oh gosh, I saw Nosferatu, which was insane. Beautiful. Bill Skarsgård did such a good job. The entire crew did such a good job. But there were things in that movie that could have been left to the viewer's imagination. And I'm finding that with a lot of modern films. There's very little left to us. And sometimes in horror movies, it is so much more powerful to leave it up to the viewer because our imaginations are wild, or mine is, but I think human beings have this ability to create these worlds and characters and characteristics and personalities that are just so expansive, and it's almost, to me, more powerful to leave us up to our own decisions. And definitely more scary sometimes. So I love that the way that they handled that in this film. I think that it was really smart and balanced. Only Lovers Left Alive, if you haven't seen it, please check it out. It is moody, it is sexy, it is tender. Tender here, people. The T word. I love, again, just the interactions that Tilda Swinton and Tom Hiddleston had in this were so soaked with confidence, sex, all of it. It was really cool to watch and absorb, and I highly recommend it if you're into grungy, moody horror films at all. Of course, I have spoiled it for you now, but watch it anyway for your own benefit. I think that even if I spoiled every single second of this film, you should still consume it on your own because your mind works differently than mine. Thank you so much for sitting here with me and listening to my non-linear conversation that I had by myself about this incredible film, Only Lovers Left Alive. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!